Hello guys, my name is Dixita. In today I give some information from the psychology of money book. In this fifth chapter of this book is getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. This quote is good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. There are a million ways to get wealthy and plenty of books on how to do so. But there's only one way to stay wealthy. Some combination of regularity and paranoia. And that's topic we don't discuss enough. Let's begin with a quick story about two investors, neither of whom knew the other, but whose paths crossed in an interesting way almost a century ago. Jesse Livermore was the greatest stock market trader of his day. Born in 1877, he became a professional trader before most people knew you could do such a thing. By age 30, he was worth the inflation adjusted equivalent of $100 million. By 1929, Jesse Livermore was already one of the most well known investors in the world. The stock market crash that year that ushered in the Great Depression cemented his legacy in history. More than a third of the stock market's value was wiped up out in an October 1929. Week Woods. Days were later named Black Monday, Black Tuesday, and Black Thursday. Livermore's wife Dorothy feared the worst when her husband returned home and on October 29th reports of Wall Street speculators committed suicide were spreading across New York. She and her children greeting Jesus at the door in tears, while her mother was so distraught she did hid in another room screaming. Jesus, according to biographer Tom Rubithon, stood confused for a few moments before realizing what was happening. He then broke the news to his family in a stroke of genius and luck. He had been sure the market betting stock would decline. You mean we are not ruined? Dorothy asked. No, darling, I have just had my best ever trading day. We are fabulously rich and can do whatever we like, Jessie said. Dorothy ran to her mother and told her to be quiet. In one day, Jessie Livermore made the equivalent of more than $3 billion. During one of the worst months in the history of the stock market, he became one of the richest men in the world. As Livermore's family celebrated their unfathomable success, another man wandered the streets of New York in desperation. Abraham Graminski was the multimillionaire real estate developer who made a fortune during the roaring 1920s. As the economy boomed, he did what virtually every other successful New, uh, New Yorker did in the late 1920s, bet heavily on the surging stock markets. On October 26, 1929, the New York Times published an article that in two paragraphs portrays a tragic ending. Berend H. Sandler, attorney of 225 Broadway, was asked yesterday morning by Mrs. Abraham Graminski of Mount Veneno to help find her husband missing since Thursday morning. Graminski, who is 50 years old and an East Side real estate operator, was said by Sandler to have interested heavily in stocks. Sandler said he was told by Mrs. Graminski that a friend saw her husband late Thursday on Wall Wall Street near the stock exchange. According to her informed, her husband was tearing a strip of ticker tape into bits and scattering it on the sidewalk as he walked toward Broadway. And that, as far as we know, was the end of Abraham Gramsci. Here we have a contrast. The October 1929 met Jesse Livermore, one of the richest men in the world. It ruined Abraham Gramsci, perhaps taking his life. But fast forward 4 years Gramsci perhaps taking his life. But fast forward 4 years and the stories cross paths again. After his 1929 blowout, Livermore, overflowing with confidence, made larger and larger bets. He wound up far over his head in increasing amounts of debts and eventually lost everything in the stock market. Broke and ashamed, he disappeared for 2 days in 1933. His wife set out to find him. Jesse L. Livermore, the stock market operator of 1100 Park Avenue, missing and has not been seen since 3 p.m. yesterday. The New York Times wrote in 1933. He returned, but his path was set. Livermore eventually took his own life. The timing was different, but Gramsci and Livermore shared a character trait. They are He returned, but his path was set. Livermore eventually took his own life. The timing was different, but Gramsci and Livermore shared a character trait. They were both very good at getting wealthy and equally bad at staying wealthy. Even if wealthy is not a word you did, you would apply to yourself. The lesson from that observation applied to everyone. At all income levels, getting money is one thing, keeping it is another. If I had to summarize the money success in a single word, it would be survival. As we will see in chapter 6, 40% of companies successful enough to become publicly traded lost effectively all of their value over time. The Forbes 400 list of richest Americans has, on average, roughly 20% turnover per decades for causes that don't have to do with that of transforming money to another family member. Capitalism is hard, but part of the reason this happens is because getting money and keeping money are two different skills. Getting money requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risks. It requires humility and fear that what you have made can be taken away from from you just as fast. It requires fragility and acceptance that at least some of what you have made it is attributable to luck. So past success can't be relied upon to repeat indefinitely. Michael Mortis, the billionaire head of Secured Capital, was asked by Charlie Rose why Scipio was so successful. Mortis mentioned longevity, nothing that some VC firms succeed for 5 or 10 years, but Sequoia has proposed for 4 decades. Rose asked why that was. Mortis, I think we have always been afraid of going out of business. Rose, really? So it's fear. Only the paranoid survive. Mortis, there's lot of truth to that. We assume that tomorrow won't be like yesterday. We can't afford to rest on our laurels. We can't be compliant. We can't assume that yesterday's success translates into tomorrow's good fortunes. Here again, survival, not growth or brain or insight. The ability to stick around for a long time without wiping out or being forced to give up is what makes the biggest difference. This should be the cornerstone of your strategy. whether it's in investing of your career or a business you own. There are two reasons why a survival mentality is so key with money. One is the obvious. Few gains are so great that they are worth wiping yourself out over. The order, as we saw in chapter 4, is the counterintuitive method of compounding. Compounding only works if you can give an asset years and years to grow. It's like planting a tree. A year of growth will never show much progress. 10 years can make a meaningful difference, and 50 years can create something absolutely extraordinary. But getting and keeping the debt, extraordinary growth requires surviving all the unpredictable ups and downs that everyone inevitably experiences over time. We can spend years trying to figure out how Buffett achieved his investment returns, how he found the best companies, the cheapest stock, the best managers. That's hard, less hard, but equally important is pointing out what he didn't do. He didn't get carried away with debt. He didn't panic and sell during the 14th recession he is lived through. He didn't sully his business reputation. He didn't attach himself to one strategy, one worldview, or one passing trend. He didn't rely on others' money. Through a public company meant investor couldn't withdraw their capital. He didn't burn himself out and quit or retire. He survived. Survival gave him longevity, and longevity investing consistently from age 10 to at least age 89 is what made compounding work wonders. That single point is what matters most when describing his success. To show you what I mean, you have to hear the story of Rick Ruin. You are you have likely heard of the investing duo of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. But 40 years ago, there was a third member of the group, Rick Gurian. Warren, Charlie, and Rick made investment together and interviewed business manager together. Then Rick kind of disappeared, at least relative to Buffett and Munger's success. Investor Mohnish Pogdian once asked Buffett what happened to Rick. Mohnish recalled, Warren said, Charlie and I was new that we would become incredibly wealthy. We were not in hurry to get wealthy. We knew it would happen. Rick was just as smart as us, but he was in a hurry. What happened was that in the 1973-1974 downturn, Rick was levered with margin bonds, and the stock markets went down almost 70% in just 2 years. So he got margin calls. He sold his Berkshire stock to Warren actually said, I bought Rick's Berkshire stock at under $40 apiece. Rick was forced to sell because he was levered. Charlie, Warren, and Rick were equally skilled at getting wealthy, but Warren and Charlie had the added skill of staying wealthy, which over time is the skill that mattered most. Nassim Taleb put it this way, having an edge and surviving are two different things. The first requires the second, you need to avoid ruin at all costs. Applying the survival mindset to the real world comes down to appreciating three things. First, more than I want big returns, I want to be financially unbreakable. And if I am unbreakable, I actually think I will get the biggest returns because I will be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders. No one wants to hold cash during a bull market. They want to own assets that go up a lot. You look and feel conservation, waiting only. cash during a bull market because you become actually aware of how much return you are giving up by not owning the good stuff. Say cash has first got 1% and stock returns 10% year. Yeah. That 9% gap will gnaw at you every day. But if that cash prevents you from having to sell your stocks during a bear market, the actual returns you earn on that cash is not 1% a year. It could be many multiples of that because preventing one despair in time stock sale can do more your lifetime returns than picking dozens of these time winners. Compounding doesn't rely on earning big returns. Merely good returns sustain uninterrupted for the longest period of time, especially in times of chaos and havoc will always win. Second is planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to plan. What's the saying? You plan, God laughs. Financial and investment planning are critical because they let you know whether your current actions are within the realm of reasonable. But few plans of any kind survive their first encounter with the real world. If you are projecting your income, saving rate, and market returns over the next 20 years, think about all the big stuff that's happened in the last 20 years that no one no one could have foreseen. September 11th, a housing boom and bust that caused nearly to 10 million Americans to lose their homes. A financial crisis that caused almost 9 million to lose their jobs. A record-breaking stock market rally that ensued. And a coronavirus that shakes the world as I write this. A plan is only useful if it can survive reality, and a future filled with unknown is everyone's reality. A good plan doesn't pretend this weren't true. It embraces it and emphasizes room for error. The more you need specific elements of a plan to be true. Specific elements of a plan to be true. The more fragile your financial life becomes, if there's enough room for error in your saving rate, that you can say, it did be great if the market returns 8% a year over the next 30 years. But if it only does 4% a year, I will stick with. Okay. The more valuable your plan becomes. Many bets fail not because they were wrong, but because they were mostly right in a situation that required things to be exactly right. Room for error, often called margin of safety, is one of the most appreciated force in finance. It comes in many forms: a frugal budget, flexible thinking, and a loose timeline. Anything that lets you live happily with a range of outcomes. It's different from being conservative is avoiding a certain level of risk. Margin of safety is risking the odds of success at a given level of risk by increasing your chances of survival. Its magic is that the higher your margin of safety, the smaller your edges need to be to have a favorable outcome. Third is a barbell personality. Optimistic about the future but paranoid about what will prevent you from getting to the future is vital. Optimism is usually defined as a belief that things will go well, but that's incomplete. Sensible optimism is a belief that the odds are in your favor and Over time, things will balance out to good outcomes. Even if what happens in between is filled will, with misery, you can be optimistic that the long-term growth trajectory is up and to the right, but equally sure that the road between now and then is filled with landmines, and always will be. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. The idea that something can gain over the long run while being a case in the short run is not intuitive, but it's how a lot of things work in life. By age 20, the average person can lose roughly half the symptom connection they had in their brain. At age 2, insufficient and radiant natural neural pathways are cleared out. But the average 20 years old is much smarter than the average 2 years old. Destruction in the face of progress is not only possible but an efficient way to get rid of success. Imagine if you were a parent and could see inside your child's brain. Every morning you notice fewer symptic connections in your kid's head. You would panic. You would say, "This can't be right. There's loss and destruction here. We need an intervention. We need to see a doctor." But, but you don't. What you are witnessing in the normal path of progress, economies, markets, and careers often follow a similar path, growing amid loss. Here how the US economy performed over the last 170 years. But do you know what happened during this period? Where do we begin? 1.3 million Americans died while fighting 9 major wars. Roughly 99.9% of all companies that were created went out of business. 4 US presidents were assassinated. 60,75,000 Americans died in a single year from a flu pandemic. 30 separate natural disasters killed at least 400 Americans each. 33 recessions lasted a cumulative 48 years. The number of forecasters who predicted any of those recession rounds to zero. The stock market fell more than 10% from a recent high at least 1.102 times. Stock lost a third of their values at least 12 times. Annual inflation exceeded 7% in 20 separate years. The worst economic pessimism appeared in newspapers at least 29,000 times according to Google. Our standard of living increased 20-fold in these 170 years, but barely a day went by that lacked tangible reason for pessimism. A mindset that can be paranoid and optimistic at the same time is here to maintain because saying this is black or white takes less effort than accepting nuance. But you need short-term paranoia to keep you alive long enough to exploit long-term optimism. Jesse Larimer figured this out the hard way. He associated good times with the end of bad times. Getting wealthy made him feel like saying wealthy was inevitable and that he was invincible after losing nearly everything he reflected. I sometimes think that no price is too high for a speculators to pay to learn that which will keep him from getting this fuel here had. A great man is smashed by brilliant men can be traced directly to this wealth here. It's expensive diseases, he said, everywhere to everybody. Next, we will look at another way, growth in the face of absurdity. can be so hard to wrap your head around. Today's next chapter is sixth is tells you win. This quote is you can wrong half the time and still make a fortune. Next is I have been bending away at these things for 30 years. I think the simple math is some projects work and some don't. There's no reason to build either one. Just get on the next. This writing Brad Pitt accepting a Screen Actor Guild Award. Heinz began film in Nazi Germany in 1936. He settled in America, where he studied literature at UC Berkeley. By most accounts, he did not show particular promise in his youth, but by the 1990s, Berggruen was, by any measure, one of the most successful art dealers of all time. In 2000, Berggruen sold part of his massive collection of Pesco, Barclays, and Metzi to the German government for more than 100 million euros. It was such a bargain that the Germans effectively considered it a donation. The private market value of the collection was well over $1 billion. That one person can collect huge quantities of masterpieces is astounding. Art is, a, is as subjective as it gets. How could anyone have foreseen early in life what were to become at the most sought after work of the century? You could say skill, you could say luck. The investment firm Horizon Research has a third explanation and it's very relevant to investors. The great investor brought vast quantities of art. The firm, the firm writers, a subset of the collection turned out to be great investment and they were held for a sufficiently long period of time to allow the portfolio return to converge upon the return of the best element in the portfolio. That's all that happens. The great art dealers operated like index funds. They bought everything they could, and they bought it in portfolio, not individual pieces they happened to like. Then they sat and waited for a few winners to emerge. That's all that happens. Perhaps 99% of the workers someone like Berguen acquired in his life turned out to be of little value. But that doesn't particularly matter. If the other 1% turn out to be the work of someone like Pisco, Berguen could be wrong most of the time and still end up standpoint Dowsley right. A lot of things is in business and investing work this way. Long tails, the farthest ends of a distribution of outcomes have tremendous influence in finance, where a small number of events can account for the majority of outcomes. That can be hard to deal with even if you understand the math. It is not intuitive that an investor can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. It means we underestimate how normal it is for a lot of things to fail, which causes us to overact when they do. Steamboat Willie put Walt Disney on the map as an animator. Business success was another story. Disney's first studio went bankrupt. His films were mon- monstrously expensive to produce and financed at outrageous, outrageous terms. By the mid 1930s, Disney had produced more than 400 cartoons. Most of them were short, most of them were beloved by viewers, and most of them lost a fortune. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs changed everything. The $8 million it earned in the first 6 months of 1938 was an order of magnitude higher than anything the company earned previously. It tra- transformed Disney Studios. All companies' debts were paid off. Key employees got recessions bonuses. The company purchased a new state-of-the-art studio in Burbank, where it remains today an Oscar-turned world famous to fall down celebrity. By 1938, he had produced several hundred hours of film, but in business terms, the 83 minutes of Snow White were, well, were all that mattered. Anything that is huge, profitable, famous, or influential is the event, and most of our attention goes to things that are huge, profitable, famous, or influential. When most of what we pay attention to it is the result of a tale, it's easy to underestimate how rare and powerful they are. Some tail-driven industries are obvious. Take venture capital. If a VC makes 50 investments, they likely expect half of them to fail, 10 to do pretty well, and one more to be bonanzas. They drive 100% of the fund's returns. Investment from correlation venture once crunches the numbers 20 out of more than 21,000 venture financing from 2004 to 2014. 65% lost money. 2.5% of investment made 10x to 20x. 1% made more than a 20% return. Half a percent, about 100 companies out of 21,000 earn 50x or more. That's where the majority of the industry's returns come from. This, you might think, is what makes venture capital so risky, and everyone investing in VC knows it's risky. Most startup fails often the world is only kind enough to allow a few mega successes. If you want suffer predictable and more stable returns, you invest in large public companies or so. You might think, remember trends drive everything. The distribution of success among large public stocks over time is not much different than it is in venture capital. Most public companies are birds of few do well and a handful become extraordinary winners that account for the majority of the stock market's return. JP Morgan Asset Management once published the distribution of returns for the Russia 3000 index, a big broad collection of the public companies since 1980. 40% of all Russia 3000 stock components lost at least 70% of their value and never recovered over this period. Effectively, all of the index's overall returns came from 7% of components companies that outperformed by at least two standard deviations. That's the kind of these things you would you did expect from venture capital, but it's what happened inside a boring, diversified index. This thumping of most public companies spares no industry. More than half of all public technology and telecom companies lost most of their values and never recovered. Even among even among public utilities, the failure rate is more than 1 in 10. The interesting thing here is that you have to have achieved a certain level of success to become a public company and a member of the Russia 3000. These are established corporations, not fly-by-night startups. Even still, most have lifespans measured in years, not generations. Take an example, one of the companies, Carlo, a former member of the Russia 3000 Index. It produced some of the biggest films of the 1980s and 1990s, including the first three Rainbow films. terminated two basic instincts and total recalls. Carlock went public in 1987. It was a huge success, churning out his after hit. It did $500 million in revenue in 1991, commanding a market cap of $400 million, big money back then, especially for a film studio. And then it failed. The blockbuster stopped, a few big budget projects flopped, and by the mid 1990s, Carlo was history. It went bankrupt in 1996. Stock goes to zero. Have a nice day. A catastrophe loss and one that 4 into 10 companies experience over time. Carco story is not worth telling because it's unique, but because it's common. Here's the most important part of this story: the Russell 3000 has increased more than 73-fold since 1980s. That is a speculator return. That is success. 40% of the companies in the index were effectively failures, but the 7% of components that performed extremely well were more than enough to offset the dirt. Just like Heinz, Bergen, but with Microsoft and Walmart instead of Psych, Fisco and Mestic. Not only do a few companies account for most of the market system, but within those companies are even more tail events written. But within those companies are even more tail events. In 2018, Amazon drew 6% of the S&P 500 returns, and Amazon's growth is almost entirely due to Prime and Amazon Web Services, which itself are tails events in a company that has experimented with hundreds of products, from the Fire phone to travel agencies. Apple was responsible for almost 7% of the index's returns in 2018, and it is driven overwhelmingly by the iPhone, which in the world of tech product is as daily as tails get. And who is working at these companies? Google's hiring acceptance rate is 0.2%, 22. Facebook is 0.1%, 30, 20, raised to 23. Apple's is about 20%, raised to 24. So the people working on these tail projects that drive tail returns have tail careers. The idea is that a few things account for most results is not just true for companies in your investment portfolios. It's also an important part of your own behavior as an investor. Napoleon's definition of a military genius was the man who can do the average things when all those around him are going crazy. It's the same in investing. Most financial advising about today: what should you do right now, and what stocks look like good buys today. But most of the times today is not the important. Over the course of your lifetime as an investor, the decision that you make today or tomorrow or next week will not matter nearly as much as what you do during the small number of days. Likely 1% of the time or less than everyone else around you is going crazy. Consider what would happen if you saved $1 every month from 1990s to 2019. You could invest that $1 invest into the US stock market every month, rain or shine. It doesn't matter if economists are screaming about a looming recession or new bear market. You just keep investing. Let's call an investor who does this show. But maybe investing during a recession is too scary. So perhaps you invest your $1 in the stock market when the economy is not in a recession. Sell everything when it's in a recession and save your monthly dollar in cash. And invest everything back into the stock market when the recession ends. We will we will call this investor gem, or perhaps it takes a few it takes a few months for a recession to scare you out, and then it takes a while to regain confidence before you get back in the market. You invest $1 in stock when there's no recession. Sell 6 months after a recession begins and invest back in 6 months after a recession ends. We will call you Tom. How much money would these three investors end up with over time? She ends up with four lakh $35,551. Zim has $2,57,386. Tom $2,34,476. She wins by a mile. There were 1,428 months between 19 and 1,900 and 2019. Just over 300 of them were during a recession. So, by keeping her cool during just the 22% of the time the economy was in or near a recession, she ends up with almost three quarters more money than Jim or Tom. To give a more recent example, how you behave as an investor during a few months in a late 2008 and early 2009 will likely likely have more impact on your lifetime returns than everything you did from 2000 to 2008. There is the old pilot quip that their jobs are hours and hours of boredom, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. It's the same in investing. Your success as an investor will be determined by how you respond to punctuated moments of terror, not the years spent on crucial control. A good definition of an investing genius is the man or woman who can do the average things when all those around them are going crazy. Tells drive everything. When you accept that tails drive everything in business, investing, and finance, you realize that it's normal for lots of things to go wrong, break, fail, and fail. If you are good stock picker, you will be right maybe half the time. If you are good business leader, maybe half of your product and strategy ideas will work. If you are a good investor, most it will be just okay and plenty will be bad. If you are a good worker, you will find the right company in the right field after several attempts and trials. And that's if you are good. Peter Liach is one of the best investors of our time. If you are Derek in the business, you are right. 6 times out of 10, he once said, there are fields where you must be prepared every time, flying a plane, for example. Then there are fields where you want to be at least pretty good nearby nearly all the times. A restaurant chef, let's say, investing, business, and finance are just not like these fields. Something I have learned from both investors and entrepreneurs is that no one makes good decisions. All the times the most impressive people are picked full of gorgeous ideas and that are often act upon. Take Amazon, it's not intuitive to think a fair product launch at a major company would be normal and fine. Intuitively, you did think the CEO should apologize to shareholders, but CEO Jeff Bezos said shortly after the disastrous launch of the company's Firefly. If you think that's big failure, we were working on much bigger failures right now. I am not kidding. Some of them are going to make the Firefly look like a tiny little belief. It's okay. For Amazon to lose a lot of money on the Fire Phone because I will be offset by something like Amazon Web Service that earns tens of billions of dollars tells to the rescue. Netflix CEO Reed Hastings once announced his company was cancelling several big budget productions. He responded, out his hit outreach ratio is way too high right now. I am always pushing the content team. We have to take more risk. Our ratio is way too high right now. I am always pushing the content team. We have to take more risk. You have to try more crazy things because we should have a higher cancel rate overall. These are not delusion or failure of responsibility. They are a smart acknowledgement of how tales drive success. For every Amazon Prime or Orange it is the new black you know, with certainty that you will have some doubts. Part of why this isn't associative is because in most fields we only see the finished product, not the losses incurred that led to the tail's success product. The Chiri's rock I see on TV is hilarious, fabulous, less. The Chiri's rock that perform in dozens of small clubs each year is just okay. That is by design. No comedic genuine is smart enough to primitively know what jokes will land well. Every big comedian tests their material in small clubs before using it in big venues. Rock was once asked if he missed small clubs. He responded, when I start a tour, it's not like I start out in arenas. Before this last tour, I performed in this place in New Brunswick called the Stress Factory. I did about 40 or 50 shows getting ready for the tour. One newspaper profiled these small club sessions. It described rock, thumbing thought pages of notes and fumbling with material. I am going to have to cut some of these jokes. Hey, says Mirskit, the good jokes I see on Netflix are the tales that stuck out of a universe of hundreds of attempts. A similar things happen in investing. It's easy to find Buffett's net or his average annual returns, or even his best most notable investment. They are right there in the open, and they are what people talk about. It's much harder to piece together every investment he's made over his career, net worth, or his average annual returns, or even his best most notable investment. They are right there in the open, and they are what people talk about. It's much harder to piece together every investment he's made over his career. No one talk about the picks and the ugly businesses, the poor acquisitions. But they are bigger part of Buffett's story. They are the other side of tail-driven returns. At the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting in 2013, Warren Buffett said he owned 400 to 500 stocks during his life and made most of his money on 10 of them. Charlie Munger followed up. If you remove just a few of Berkshire top investment, its long-term track record is pretty average. When we pay special attention to a role model's success, we all look at their gains came from a small percent of their actions. That makes our own failures, losses, and setbacks feel like we're doing something wrong. But it's possible we are wrong or just sort of right, just as often as the master are. They may have been more right when they were right, but they could have been wrong just as often as you. It's
It's not whether you are right or wrong that's important, George Soros once said. But now, how much money you make when you are right and how much you lose when you are wrong? You get you can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. There are 100 million planets in our galaxy and only one, as far as we know, with intelligent life. The fact that you are reading this book is the result of the longest tale you can imagine. That's something to be happy about. Next, let's look at how money can make you even happier. Today's next chapter is seventh. Seventh is freedom. This quota is controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. The highest forms of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. People want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone's different, but if there's common denominators in happiness, a universal fuel of joy, it's that people want to control their lives. The ability to do what you want, what when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. Engineers Campbell was a psychologist at the University of Michigan. Born in 1910, his research took place during an age when psychology was overwhelmingly focused on disorders that brought people down, things like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. Campbell want to know that made people happy. His 1981 book, The Senses of Well-Being in America, starts by pointing out that people are generally happier than many psychologists assume, but some were clearly doing better than others, and you couldn't be necessarily group them by income or geography or education because so many in each of these those categories end up chronically unhappy. The most powerful common denominators of happiness was simple. Campbell Campbell summed it up. Having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feeling of well-being than many of the objective conditions of life we have considered. More than your salary, more than the size of your house, more than the prestige of your job. Control over doing what you want, when you want to, with the people you want to, is the broadest lifestyle variable that makes people happy. Money is the greatest initiative value, and this can't be overstated is its ability to give you control over your time, to obtain bit by bit a level of independence and autonomy that comes from unspent assets that give you greater control over what you can do and when you can do it. A small amount of wealth means the ability to take a few days off work when you are sick without breaking the bank. Gaining that ability is huge if you don't have it. A bit more means waiting for a good job to comes out around after you get laid off rather than having to take the first one you find. That can be life changing. 6 months emergency expenses means not being terrified of your boss because you know you won't be ruined if you have to take some time off to find a new job. More still means the ability to take a job with lower pay but flexible hours, maybe one with a shorter commute, or being able to deal with a medical emergency without the added burden of worrying about how you will pay for it. Then they're retiring when you want to instead of when you need to. Using your money to buy time and options has a lifestyle benefit few luxuries goods can compete with. Throughout college, I want to be an investment banker. There was only one reason why. They made a lot of money. That was the only drive and one I was 100% positive would make me happier once I got it. I scored a summer internship at an investment bank. Is in Lo- Los Angeles in my junior year and thoughts I won the career lottery. This is all I ever want. On my first day, I realized why investment bankers make a lot of money. They first day they work longer and more controlled hours than I knew humans could handle. Actually, most can't handle it. Going home before midnight was considered a luxury, and there was a saying in the office: if you don't come to work on Saturday, don't bother coming back on Sunday. The job was intellectually simulating, paid well, and made me feel important. But every waking seconds of my time became a slave to my boss's demands, which was enough to turn it into one of the most miserable experiences of my life. It was the 4 month internship I last a month. The hardest things about this was that I loved the work and I want to work hard, but doing something you love one schedule on a schedule you can't control can feel the same as doing something you'll hate. There is a name for this feeling. Psychologists call it re- reactions. Joan Berger, a marketing professor at the University of Pennsylvania, summed it up well. People like to feel like they are in control, in the driver's seat. When we try to get them to do something, they feel disempowered rather than feeling like they made the choice. They feel like we made it for them. So they say no or do something else, even when they might have originally been happy to go along. When you accept how true that statement is, you realize that aligning money toward a life that lets you do what you want, when you want, with who you want, where you want, for as long as you want, has incredible returns. Derek Sivers, a successful entrepreneur, once wrote about friends who asked him to tell the story about how he got rich. I had a day job in my midtown Mahan, Manhattan, paying $20,000 per year, about minimum wages. I never ate out and never took a taxi. My cost of living was about $1,000 per month, and I was earning $1,800 per month. I did this for 2 years and saved up $12,000. I was 22 years old. Once I had $12,000, I could quit my job and become a full-time musician. I knew I could get a few gigs per month to pay my cost of living. So I was free. I quit my job a month later and never had a job again. When I finished telling my friends this story, he asked for more. I said no. That was it. He said, no, what about when you sold your companies? I said no. That didn't make a big difference in my life. That was just more money in the bank. The difference happened when I was 22 raised to 26. Thank you so much listening for me.